Tucson voters have approved raising the minimum wage to $15 by a very large margin. Not just a large margin. This was a 2-to-1. Tucson is a key base for Democrats in Arizona, whose senior Dem senator made quite a show of opposing minimum wage hike earlier this year. Fuck them poors. Whoop, fuck the poors, yeah. Turns out these policies, as people tell you over and over again, because when Americans are polled on them, they're incredibly popular for a reason. I'm sorry to say, contrary to my earlier statements through interpretive dance, I do believe that we are utterly and completely fucked. And I'm simply here to let you know that this is the Doomer report, and we're going to have to do doom and gloom. And I'm basically jumping ship, everybody. I've had it with politics, and I'm switching over to Keemstar. I'm gonna audition to be Keemstar. Apparently, Keemstar is accepting replacements. So I'm gonna have to record my Keemstar replacement today, and you know, get on that. Well, actually, you know, I do have some good news and some bad news, but let's talk about the election results. More flashing than Vosh's take so far. What was Vosh's take? Was it doom? Because I'll meet your doom with a little gloom, you know. Don't worry, I've got a whole variety of news. You have no idea. But let's talk about this a little bit, okay? So, yesterday is now being marketed to us as a day in which the progressive policies, the neo-postmodern Marxist ideology, the Stalinist regime of Joe Biden has effectively been rejected by the American people. They want no more of it. They are disgusted by it. All this CRT in schools, you know, teaching kids as young as 1 that apparently being white makes you racist by design, that you're hard-coded to be a KKK member. That's what they're trying to teach you newborns in schools and other shit. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is basically turning this whole country into the USSR as quickly as he can through every single non-bill that gets passed. And yet there was a rebuke. Yesterday was a fine rebuke to these policies. So what's going to happen now that they've rejected the progressives? Well, it could be that the progressive in question was actually a deeply entrenched Democratic, let's just say, corporate stooge who had a lot of funding from a lot of other wealthy corporate Democratic donors, and that running singularly on Trump bad now doesn't work anymore because Trump gone. Trump's been gone for a while. So if you keep saying, hey everyone, don't you remember how bad January 6th was? Don't you remember how terrible it was under Donald Trump? Don't you remember how evil they can be, and Mitch McConnell's still here and things like this? That's not going to win you elections, you know? Promising a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of policies that could actually help everyday Americans, and then not really enacting them, well, that's going to lose you elections. That's just the reality of the situation. Neoliberalism is a wounded, dying animal. America's returning to populism, whether our politicians want it or not. The big question is, will progressive or fascist populism rise? Populism was a big winner in Virginia election yesterday after Terry McAuliffe ran on his pass as a Bill Clinton Democrat, and Glenn Youngkin ran as a right-wing populist. As Glenn Abernathy noted this morning in the Washington Post, the fact that paternal rights and education became a central campaign issue shows that populism is still a potent element in U.S. politics. And in the Republican Party, even with Trump out of the White House, populism, not conservatism, remains the GOP's principal identity. Now, if they manage to combine this with the same kind of progressive populism ideas, such as we are the 99% versus the 1%, we have a lot of rich corporate elites who are dictating a lot of our everyday lives, they are infecting politics, and at the end of the day, there is a swamp and it needs to be drained. Well, you've got yourself even more dangerous combinations. If you fuse that with a lot of the issues that they seem to be really charged about right now, which is that schools are having sex ed taught to them at very young ages, they're showing pornography in class, and on top of that, while they're not learning about the pornos, they're being taught about racism, the CRTs, all this stuff that, you know, you kind of laughed at because you're like, you dumb Republicans. It's so dumb. None of you understand. You don't even know what CRT is. That's not what CRT is. The CRT is not being taught in schools. It's certainly not being taught in kindergarten. I mean, it's being taught in, like, you know, second degree law in university. But I mean, this is not a problem. Like, okay, you have your culture war. Get out there, you silly Republicans. Go out there and culture war yourselves away. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, people are really angry about this. And I can tell you, you know who was way more frightening during the Canadian election? Between, I don't know, progressives, NDP, lefties, communists, or was it the anti-maskers who were galvanized, who were angry, who were literally on the streets throwing rocks at the Prime Minister of Canada? That's who was mad. That's who was charged up. That's who was ready to fight, you know, at the end of the day. So yeah, this shit works. It doesn't matter if they're being sold a lie. It doesn't matter if they've all been taught a lie. It doesn't matter if every single one of them is like, oh, CRT bad. Oh, CRT taught to kids, extra bad. That shit is working. That shit is getting them energized. That shit is making them think, fuck, I gotta hit the polls. And I gotta get my friends out to hit the polls.
Video on stream smile.
Kravitron, thank you for the $20. I really want to have a conversation with Hakeem. I think it would be good for learning on both ends. Well, I would probably learn more from him. He seems incredibly educated on a lot of topics related to Marxism. But yes, I am interested in talking with Hakeem. I will organize such things. I know he probably thinks of me as a rad lib synthetic leftist, but I'll prove him wrong. It's gotten so bad that when Americans believe a politician... Oh, thank you so much. That's very generous of you. It's gotten so bad that when Americans believe a politician is listening to them and largely doing what they want, they'll overlook a multitude of personal sins. They'll even elect a rapist and a convicted grifter to the highest office in the land if they think he's doing the people's will instead of the will of the wealthy elites. This is something that you're seeing Tucker Carlson constantly pushing, and not just him, the Fox News machine, the OWN machine, even the Steve Bannons. This cabal of global elites is trying to control your lives. And this shit resonates. Manchin thinks yesterday's results validates his concerns. Well, of course he does. I mean, he's got to find a way to justify the fact that at the end of the day, he's bought out. It's about the monies. It's also an indication of how completely Americans think about their government has detached itself from them. Voters in 2016 were willing to throw in with the grifter rapist because they believed he put their interests above those morbidly rich. This political movement has been brewing for decades. Again, Donald Trump is not the cause of any of this, he was the symptom. The big break between Americans and their government began in the late 1970s when the UN Supreme Court, in the Buckley-Bellotti decision of 1976 and 1978, ruled that when billionaires and corporations, even foreign corporations, bought US politicians, it was no longer corruption or bribery, but instead it was the First Amendment's protected free speech. The GOP jumped into the game with the SCOTUS defined new rules in the 1980 election as Ronald Reagan rode a wave of big money into the White House. The Democratic Party, suffering from a loss of funding after Reagan destroyed their labor union base, also jumped into the newly defined political game in 1992 with Clinton's third wave. I'm sure everyone here is pretty familiar with the third wave. And this is around the era where, I believe, in my personal opinion, we did have the social posturing of the Democrats, in which they would say publicly, hey, you know, we're socially a lot less conservative than the Republican Party. Well, at the same time, their policies, and especially the policies of Bill Clinton, were actually more damaging to black communities, despite the fact that they were being advertised as being very pro-multiracial, stuff of that nature. As Reagan killed labor unions and moved the nation's tax burden from the very rich to the working class people with 18 middle-class tax sites and a massive tax cut for rich people, Americans began to notice their government growing more and more remote from their interests. Reagan undid regulations protecting the environment. People noticed their air and water getting dirtier and more likely to cause cancer. He sold off beloved public lands to drillers and miners for pennies on the dollar. He sided with employers over workers, bankers over debtors. So Americans turned to Bill Clinton, who promised a new covenant with the American people, saying he came from poverty and a broken family, and therefore he felt their pain. Quickly, though, people figured out that he was just as remote as Reagan. Clinton gutted the social safety net and declared an end to all welfare as we know it, because again, the problem is welfare, you know? Because if people get welfare, they're not going to work. They're not going to get to their jobs. They're going to become welfare kings and queens and dukes and bishops. There's going to be a whole welfare monarchy out there. You can't have that. You know, that's going to be the end of society. and presided over the second stage of the NAFTA WTO neoliberal free trade experiment that ultimately wiped out American manufacturing and took Walmart from 100% made in the USA, low prices, low wages, to everything made in China. The Supreme Court intervened again in 2000 and put George W. Bush into the White House, but he wasn't any better. He lied us into 2 wars to get himself reelected, began the privatization of Medicare to the vicious Medicaid Advantage scam, and handed trillions in taxes taken from working people to military contractors and those in Daddy's Carlyle group. This is the age of the neocons. So a lot of terrible phases. You basically have neoliberalism under Reagan, you have Third Way under Clinton, you have the neocons under Bush. The pressure's building. The middle-class Americans knew they were now way back in the back of the bus as wages remained flat and fell in the face of 30 years of inflation, with those at the top of the corporate ladder having become richer than the pharaohs. People desperately hoped for a return to normalcy of the New Deal Great Society years when the middle class was rockin'. And hey, by the way, not only was it rockin', fucking unions were doing great. But Obama was unable or unwilling to overturn the new rules the Supreme Court had given us in the 1970s. In fact, 5 conservatives on the court doubled down with them in the 2010 Citizens United decision, which made it even harder for regular people to run for public office, while making it even easier for billionaires and corporations to buy and sell politicians. Now, I don't want to get all lefty on all of y'all, but something that Marx spoke about pretty heavily was the fact that those with capital are going to use capital to exude power. Capital in society gives you power, after all. So, it's going to corrupt things like the political nature if politicians and capital become intertwined. So this is a deeply, deeply upsetting problem. And I know some people are also going to say, but money ain't everything, which is true, because at the end of the day, Hillary Clinton outspent Donald Trump quite a bit, which should also scare you. Not only that there's this massive amount of corruption and money in politics in the United States, but that there's also such a thirst for populism and a rejection of the entire political apparatus that people are willing to turn to these kind of people. They actually look upon Donald Trump as a savior in that instance. Donald Trump, this rich elite, this self-proclaimed billionaire, but he's a self-made man after all. He didn't get his money from daddy. He didn't fuck up time and time again and get a whole bunch of bailouts, even though he was fucking failing casinos all the time. No, at the end of the day, he's one of you. He's what you all aspire to be. He's the American fucking living dream. If you work hard and you play by the rules, you too can be someone who grows up to be the president of the United States, who has trophy wives, trophy gumas, all of this kind of stuff. That could be you, America. So, vote for me. I'll get rid of all those elites, and then we're going to get right back to doing stuff that we love, which is America first, nationalism. Come on, baby. Trump as president did the work that a populist would do to convince them it was true. He called out China for taking advantage of policies put into place by Reagan, Bush, and Clinton. He traveled the country on a regular basis, meeting with people in huge rallies, and told them he loved them, and lied that he was their champion. He said he was going to keep American jobs in American hands by stopping immigrants from entering the country, and cut legal immigration to a trickle, while brutally punishing those families who managed to make it into the country. It was the fascist form of populism, but for about half of the American electorate, it felt like progressive populism, and the right-wing media bubble kept them from the ugly realities of what Trump was really up to. He cut taxes on the rich people, let more poisons into our environment, suppressed wages, and crushed our kids' educational opportunities. So, was the election of Joe Biden something that people were turning to because they wanted hope? Because they were like, oh yes, we need a new president who's going to come and change the system? Or was it a rebuke of Trump? Was it like, holy fuck, I can't believe how much Trump is fucking things up. We need some change. And unfortunately, it's going to have to come in the form of old smelly Joe. And I'm not saying in the sense that he might smell bad. I don't know what he smells like, but that he likes to smell people. That's where the old smelly Joe comes. It's no surprise that Americans are sick and tired of politics as usual in this new world defined by the Supreme Court's decisions. They want populist politicians who think about their needs, talk about solutions to the country's problems, and are unafraid of taking on the rich and powerful. So, yes, popular politicians, progressive politicians, Bernie Sanders, Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the rest of the Congressional Progressive Caucus have figured this out and stepped into that space. About half the Democratic Party is with them, and the populist progressive movement is vibrating with energy across the country. The problem is that there is this divide amongst the Democratic Party, and this is them sincerely eroding themselves from within. The idea that we still need to reach across the aisle, first off, that we need to work with Republicans who have antithetical beliefs or systems to what exactly you're trying to enact, or the very common ground that you could be finding happens to only be in the form of the military, funding for Israel, increasing the funding of the Iron Dome, increasing the funding of the police state, increasing the funding of the military-industrial complex. Hey, There's no debates going on there, all right? Doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. Everyone's on board. Cha-ching. Yeah, you need money? Here we go. Fuck big government. Hey, let's get the biggest government possible. Let's get these two things going. Done. But at the end of the day, what do the American people want? Because guess who got blamed for yesterday? Progressives. I'm not joking. You got to check this out before we go to some of the statements. Here's a whole bunch of check marks for you. Some in Biden land are already asking themselves if the president has allowed himself to be tugged too far to the left while in office, and those voices are likely to get louder now. Dem members are already texting me, blaming progressives for the debacle in Virginia. Once again, the electoral evidence indicates that America is not as progressive as socialist members believe it is. And yes, I believe that passing the BIF would have made a difference, but not enough to change the results based on what I'm seeing. MSNBC blaming increasingly like Democrats' loss in Virginia on Biden withdrawing from Afghanistan. Good job, MSNBC. Good job. Great analysis. Great analysis. Oh, how about this? The elections were repudiation of the progressive agenda across this country.
The governor's race to Glenn Young is a more moderate Democrat, former law enforcement officer. In Buffalo, the socialist Democrat that won the nomination, it looks like, we haven't called it yet because they have to count the write-in votes, but it looks like the incumbent Democrat, a more conservative guy, a more moderate Democrat, it looks like he's going to win a write-in campaign. We have that Minneapolis police, the elimination of the police department, losing in Minneapolis. That is a very liberal town. And then you have the Terry McAuliffe, basically Democratic royalty in this country, losing the governor's race to Glenn Youngkin. I don't know what's happening in New Jersey, but it's anybody's race, including a guy whose name we're all still learning how to pronounce, especially me, Jack Ciattarelli. This is a bad night for Democrats, and they control everything. It is, I don't know if it's a rejection of the Democratic Party or the party moving too much to the left or the party not delivering on progressivism. That's for
I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions, you know. This is definitely a concerned rebuke of popular progressive policies, of these postmodern neo-Marxist policies that we've been told so much about, that the communist-in-chief, Joe Biden, has been trying so hard to enact. That's what this was, right? Right, liberal media? I've got a little rebuke to that. Tucson voters have approved raising the minimum wage to $15 by a very large margin. Not just a large margin. This was a 2-to-1. Tucson is a key base for Democrats in Arizona, whose senior Dem senator made quite a show of opposing minimum wage hike earlier this year. Fuck them poors. Whoop, fuck the poors, yeah. Turns out these policies, as people tell you over and over again, because when Americans are polled on them, they're incredibly popular for a reason. For a fucking reason. Because yes, it does help out the average American. The average American is not someone who's waiting for the trust fund check to clear. Is not waiting to inherit their parents' house. The average American could use $15 an hour as opposed to whatever the minimum wage was at that time. There's a reason people, when given the option, are like, oh, increase the minimum wage? Yes. And I make more than minimum wage. I still want the minimum wage to be increased. Absolutely. No question. It's going to give the middle Americans, the unwashed masses, the uncouth, whatever you want to call them, a lot more purchasing power in society as well. To buy all of your things, capitalists. To buy your toys and your plastic and your cars and all this kind of shit. Now to clip Lance out of context, I've given you a lot of opportunity to do that. But it never fails. Like, to say that someone who was not progressive in any stretch of the imagination, okay? The candidate who lost here was not a member of the progressive Democratic wing. Someone who was deeply and highly funded by a lot of corporate Democrats, by the entire, democratic mechanism, to then say that this person was rejected as a rebuke, that they took umbrage with progressive policies and that Republicans were firmly in that camp, is not the story. Okay, the story here is very, very clear. That progressive Democrats, so-called, progressive Democrats, they're not delivering on the progressive promises. So they're just being seen as politically ineffective. So what's the point of even having them in power? Combine that with the fact that the Republicans are weaponizing populism right now, and they're doing it very politically effectively. So they're making key issues like education something that everyone cares about, where people are enraged about CRT being taught in schools, where they're showing up screaming that this not happen, and teachers and principals are just fucking utterly perplexed. They have to have these PTA meetings where like, we're not doing this. We're not teaching your kids CRT. We don't teach anyone CRT. That's for law students. It's a law thing. What the ever-loving fuck are you all talking about right now? And that's one. The other is, of course, we're not giving your kids pornography. Why would we do that? That's illegal. That would wind us all in jail cells. We'd all be in jail if we gave your kids. Why do you think we're doing this? Well, I saw in the Daily Caller multiple times that apparently all of you progressives just want to teach kids about blowjobs and 69ing. And I think that's sick. That's sick. What happens when my son comes home and he asks, what's up with dad's pegging wand? What am I supposed to say then, huh? I don't have to explain that. I don't have to explain it just because it's in the dishwasher at the time. I don't want to talk about any of this. God damn it. Keep that shit away from my kids. Steve Sweeney, the most powerful Democrat in New Jersey legislator, is down by 2,000 votes to Edward Durr, a truck driver from South Jersey. The Republican newcomer spent just $153 at Dunkin' to feed his staff and to buy some flyers. This is a great story. If you look up Sweeney for 30 seconds, you'll find some of his signature achievements include passing a bill specifically to help Verizon, and then you've got the other side of the tale, Edward Durr. What an amazing name. All Americans should be named that. And this is just a completely unrelated kind of funny thing that someone predicted this would happen. Terry loses, Lee Carter is going to come off private and tweet that he would have won. Oh, I thought that was funny. I like when things is predicted. By the way, I'm sure everyone heard about the Lincoln Project. You know, the Lincoln Project, the beloved Democratic operative made up of ex-Republicans who are just destroying people in elections, who like to take credit for election victories. Like, you know, after Joe Biden got elected, they were like, you know, mission accomplished or something like that. Right before this election, they staged a false flag, tiki torch, white power rally. So there's that. Democrats were accused of manufacturing a white supremacist hoax, but internal plans show the stunt was rooted in their doomed, Trump-focused strategy. A Democratic operative working within the Lincoln Project sent 5 young people dressed in khakis, white shirts, and sunglasses to hold tiki torches in front of Glenn Youngkin's campaign, but as it docked in Charlottesville, Virginia on Friday, she never considered that people might think they were actual white supremacists. The tiki torch stunt was meant to echo the far-right show of force in the city in 2017 and visually tie Youngkin campaign for the Virginia governorship to former President Donald Trump, a manifestation of Democrats' ultimately doomed strategy not to attack Youngkin on his own terms, but to tar him by association with Trump. Instead, when local media painted the stunt as a real demonstration by white supremacists, and it was amplified by the campaign of Democratic Terry McAuliffe for former governor of the state, it spiraled out of control, with the Lincoln Project only claiming credit for it much later in the day. Though Democrats would later be accused of manufacturing a white supremacist hoax, the poorly conceived stunt always intended to be transparent that its intent was to link Youngkin to Trump and the infamous Charlottesville protests. Now, you know the problem with all this is that, again, you're running on a campaign of we're not Trump. We're not Trump. We're not the Republican Party. Okay, cool. What the fuck are you? That's the bigger problem here. Like, you know, when Obama won, he won under a false sense of hope and change, and that inspired people, and that inspired Americans, and inspired them to go to the polls. Turned out to be bullshit. We all know that in hindsight. You know, no one could have predicted the drone strikes or anything like that, but at the time, that's inspiring. Giving people something to root for, to get energized about. Not just saying, hey, by the way, those guys are fascists. Don't vote for them. Vote for us. Not the fascists. Because you're better than that. You can do better. Come on. Really sad about India Walton for Buffalo. After sleeping on last night's results and speaking with my team this morning, I want to update you on the state of the race. Tens of thousands of write-ins and absentee ballots have yet to be tabulated, and we believe that democracy requires that every vote be counted and that any improprieties that occurred be brought to light. However, while we anticipate that the margins will narrow, it seems unlikely that we will end up with enough votes to inaugurate Walton administration in January. I couldn't be more proud of the campaign we ran. It wasn't just a field program and messaging strategies attached. It was a deeply felt love letter to the working people of our beautiful city. This was a special campaign. Our volunteer operation was unprecedented in Buffalo political history. We raised over $1 million from thousands upon thousands of smaller donors. We introduced Buffalo. Hey, thank you, Raven, for the 200 biddies. I love what Cable News is trying to say the black vote is the reason they didn't win. What did you give us? What material things did you do to improve our lives? We should also talk about the response in Charlottesville, especially in relation to the black vote. But Tim Black could say it better than me, so I'll play a clip from him. One major accomplishment of ours is ending the era of complacency for Buffalo politicians. No longer can they feel confident that they can rest easy in their seats of power. No longer can we feel that their offices are safe without having to do anything to improve the lives of their constituents. They now know that unless they step up for our city, their careers are at risk. We taught them that. This is something really important when it comes to all of this, by the way, is the fact that everyone keeps talking about 2022 and that the Democrats are just going to become completely shellacked. And if this Build Back Better bill continues to be watered down, continues to have things removed, continues to have anything that could materially help the average American, especially the poorest Americans, then yeah, I agree with that. Because you have to present something. You have to give the American people more than we're not Trump. We're not the Trump party. Because again, then that leaves me to say, then what are you? I know where the progressives lie on all this, obviously. I know what Bernie Sanders would, like, if Bernie Sanders was given, just let's say, carte blanche to do whatever he wanted with this bill, put in whatever you want, Bernie. Let's see what you got, okay? Show us what you got, Bernie. We know the kind of things that he'd be throwing in there. Between the $15 minimum wage, Green New Deal, paid family leave, paid sick leave, maybe even longer vacation days for workers, lower working hours, things like that, right? Those are the kind of things that are unbelievably popular with the American public. Medicare for fucking all. That shit crosses through party lines. Okay? It doesn't matter how much Republicans come out there and they're like, oh, death panels, private insurance imploding, the world is ending, Marxism, you basically want communism here. Doesn't matter about all that if you can enact it and people get it in their everyday lives. None of that, it'll just be white noise. I can tell you that from experience because in Canada, for conservatives, abolishing public health care is a non-starter. No one would do that. It's popular amongst conservatives. It's popular amongst liberals. Doesn't matter because yes, the average Canadian doesn't have the $150,000 a year salary, and then they're like, well, it doesn't matter what happens to me. You know, should I break a leg or get a splinter or something? I can easily afford going to the hospital and getting a professional to take a look at it. That's not what's going on in the head in the average Americans. And blaming the entire thing, honestly, on progressives or the lack of black voters, things like that, is at best wrong, and at worst racist and shameless, to say the very least. Gonna have to agree with the name of this title. Don't blame black voters for Terry's loss.
Stop right now. Let's stop being naive.
Warning, warning.
To say that someone's stupid is diminishing the actual corruption in place. To say someone doesn't get it.
Warning, warning.
Only serves to distract us from the point, the true point of the matter. The fact of the matter is, they can't get it because they're paid not to get it. Their very survival on a financial level hangs in the balance on them not getting it. They have to pretend not to get it. Let's get ready to tumble! Ladies and gentlemen, just in. That's some good news for the Democratic Party. Looks as if the quarterback is toast. Ladies and gentlemen, it's something I've been trying to tell people, not articulating it. They weren't listening to us. They were not listening to us. We've been talking about this. We've been talking about this. Some of us have been saying this for almost a year now.
I'm going to get to that.
Some of us have been saying it for 5 years.
News.
Hell, I started my career in politics saying it. Black people need something for their votes. It looks as if Terry McAuliffe is getting his clock cleaned in Virginia. This is just a precursor, I tell you, just a precursor to what's going to be future ongoings or goings on. This is what's happening, guys. The Democratic Party does not deliver. Therefore, the Democratic Party
Democratic officials, state senators, others, telling me that the Republican's going to win. That kind of weighs heavily with me.
In the late going of this race, as McAuliffe's lead was evaporating, From the Republican, we were hearing about parents versus unions in schools and about race. Does that seem to you to be something we'll hear a lot more about as we head toward the midterms?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I think it will be somewhat refined from what has been determined here in Virginia. There were some rough edges on both sides. Well, the Democrats didn't really even have...
Oh, refined, you say? Oh, yes, well, we're just going to have a very nice and civil conversation about racial inequalities in America. Let's see how that goes, yes. Pull yourself a little Courvoisier and enjoy some refined discussions.
...a plan to refute the attacks on critical race theory and other items that were used to go after school policy. They clearly have to develop one quickly and use it, implement it. For the Republicans, I think they'll want to make certain they refine it in a way that does not suggest that they are being racially insensitive, which some people, certainly in minority communities.
And as an outsider, as a Canadian watching all this, all right, where CRT has not become a talking point in this country in the same way it is in the US, it does seem like if I was to talk to a normie or someone who was apolitical or tries to be anyway, and was like, hey, by the way, did you hear about the CRT thing in the US? It would come across as so utterly bizarre. It was like, okay, explain it to me. Okay, well, the Coles notes of this all is that there is a theory in legal practice as well as in legal studies that involves in which systems of power enforce power upon one another. And for some reason, they believe that this highly complicated and very nerdy legal theory is going to be taught in elementary school. Wait, what? Yeah, they're going to teach it in elementary school. I mean, they're not, obviously, because kids wouldn't have any idea what the fuck they were talking about. But that's the fear. It's that they're worried they're going to teach it in schools. Oh, and also, what it's actually about has nothing to do with what they think it's about. What it's actually about is so far removed from what they think it means that they actually continually have to change what they think it's about whenever they're asked about it. So when CRT comes up, they'll be like, it's about how white people are racist, how time is bigoted, and you're like, no. And not only that, they believe it so passionately now, even though it's not real, and they don't know what it is. It's not real, and they don't know what it is. They're willing to go to the polls and get galvanized over this as a hot button issue. Something, again, that does not exist, and they don't know what it is. And that's enough. Like, wow. I guess if nothing else, I'm impressed. I'm impressed that it worked. I'm impressed that it got as far as it did.
Did interpret their approach as being.
Larry Sabato.
Oh, in the Virginia race at least, it seems as though the Democrats are flat-footed when it came to challenging or refuting the critical race theory nonsense that has been flying around. Now, we all know, and what the truth is may not always be, or the thing that you think you're arguing about may not be always what the attack is. So, wild instances of people having certain kind of flavor sprinkled into their curriculums in schools has morphed into this overarching idea that the Democrats are somehow the party of black people, like as if they really fight for black folks, as if they are really... So they have these conservative or moderate Democrats thinking and Republicans thinking, which are almost the same thing. Maybe barring gay marriage or something. But they have them believing that the Democratic Party is full of a bunch of radical lefties that want to make things equal or make white people feel bad about being white people or make black people feel good about being black people but by still being disenfranchised. And for some reason that sells well. Two things here. First of all...
Oh, it sells very, very well. And you know what? It's got different forms and variations. In the UK, for example, right now, trans ideology is a very hot button topic, and one that is going to be used and galvanized for political goals. In fact, that's just not a UK thing. It's a massive Republican thing too. Hey, it's a PPC thing over here in Canada as well. It seems to be that people care a lot about these policies and these fears that are instilled in them that aren't actually based in reality. And that becomes such a galvanizing thing that, again, people are willing to go to the polls. They're willing to get angry about this because they're really worried about the children, goddammit. It's about the fucking kids.
You don't need a good defense if you got a good-ass offense. And the Democratic Party does not have an offense.
And this is all happening, by the way. This is happening while the Democrats control the levers of power, right? I mean, you can make the debate that the Senate, of course, is the tie vote, and they, from a lot of bills, need those 60 votes. Fine. But while the Democrats are in power, the Republicans are trying to erode any future abilities for them to gain power. Senate Republicans blocked debate on third major voting rights bill. Republican senators on Wednesday voted to block debate on the third major voting rights bill that congressional Democrats have sought to pass this year in response to the state-level GOP to push to restrict ballot access on former President Donald Trump's false claims of a stolen 2020 election. Wednesday's vote on the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, named after the civil rights icon and former congressman who died last year, fell short of the 60 votes necessary to proceed, 51 to 49. Only one Republican, Senator Alisa Murkowski of Alaska, voted to advance it. Two prior bills put forward by congressional Democrats.
Yeah.
ICO rules. That rules. Thank you for the raiding party of 92. Welcome in, Raiders. We're just talking about the US of A, the elections, and I'm going to start out this, well, I have been doing it, with some doom, but we're going to move from doom to gloom, because I do have good news at the end of all of this, especially when it comes to people who happen to be of the progressive or leftist persuasion, okay? So that's going to be there. Don't worry about that. But anyways, welcome in, everybody. Can you please give Aiko a follow back? Aiko is in the middle of doing a partner push. She's based, she's funny, and she puts way more work into her streams than the average streamer. Like, I know a lot of people are like, Lance, you have all these cool effects and rooms and stuff, but like, Aiko actually manipulates her voice in the streams, which is really neat, because it's like Twin Peaks if Twin Peaks was a streamer. That's my best way of describing Aiko Rules stream. So please go check out Aiko's channel. The testicle breather keeps posting about the Great Reset. Luckily, it doesn't get much engagement. True. Thank you. Hello, world. Let me open this for later. Did you see the Fox video of a teacher dunking on a lady about CRT in Columbus and was like, we need to fact check that? No. Kravitron, send it to me, please. Yeah, I know. I have audio, special audio effects, but it's just in the fact that I always have audio issues on the stream because my computer hates me. I probably need to replace all the parts in it or something. I don't know. But anyways, hey, this is incredibly important. Well, it would have been had they been able to pass this. But here's the thing. The fact that the Democrats are getting stalled on things like this, and obviously, yes, they don't have the votes necessary. They would need Republicans to come on board, unless, of course, we're going to ignore the parliamentarian, which actually, in the case of this Voting Rights Act, might be the time for you to start exuding some force. And in the case of the Build Back Better Act, if you are getting pissed off at the fact that, hey, it was originally, what, $7.2 trillion, and then luckily it became $3.5 trillion, and now it's a nice cool 1.7, and then we'll probably settle somewhere around, I don't know, 0.5 by the time the whole thing is done. It'll have like one thing in it. That would have been a really good opportunity when it was a lot higher, and you only had two holdouts, aka Cinema and Manchin, to again put the bill on the table. Like, I don't see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris galvanizing their base on this one, coming out publicly and denouncing the very people within their party who are holding back things, like, you could frame this as they are holding the American workers hostage, and everyone's going to be like, whoa, hush, how dare you turn on fellow Democrats, you have to be unified. It's like, those Democrats are turning on you. They are blocking the policies that most likely will affect material change in Americans' lives and help you get elected in other elections. So people can actually turn to something other than, we're not Trump. We're not the fascists. Don't worry. We got this. And I mean, people who are on the lefty side of the aisle will be like, well, you've done very little, if anything, to change the American imperial war machine. I don't see you scaling it back. In fact, you're scaling it up. So nothing there. But at least you're not going to do what the Republicans do, which is enact a whole bunch of horrifying social policies. For now, until the pendulum swings right back in the other direction, lest you actually implement some things that'll help out the American people. The John Lewis bill instead seeks to empower the Justice Department and federal courts to review state election laws, and in some cases before they take effect, restoring provisions for the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that has been struck down by the Supreme Court in a series of decisions since 2013, while Republicans have supported prior reauthorizations of the Voting Rights Act, most recently in 2006. That support has all but evaporated since 2013 Shelby County decision that really and effectively ended the practice of pre-clearance, giving federal prosecutors and judges the right to review and preemptively block discriminatory voting laws in certain covered jurisdictions with a history of racial prejudice. So, Combine no significant voting reform with the fact that Republicans are successfully gerrymandering every single district they can get their hands on, and you've got a wonderful recipe for them trying to secure future elections, even if the demographics that would typically vote Republican are changing in America. They're being replaced.
So it's empowering. They don't have an offense when it comes to how they run these campaigns and what they run on. I'm trying to tell you guys that I do not believe for a moment, folks, that the Republicans or the moderate Democrats, or whoever they are, who are so turned off by critical race, would be so turned off by critical race if Terry McAuliffe had a substantive offering that was going to change the lives of people in Virginia. You got to have something to really offer people. If you don't, they listen to shit like this. But Terry McAuliffe didn't have anything to offer. All Terry McAuliffe ran on, my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, phone number's on the screen, 319-527-6212. Terry McAuliffe ran on, Trump is...
My Twitter profile is still wearing his Halloween costume. I mean, I don't know if your computer is frozen, but changed that a couple days ago, I think.
Evil. Trump is evil. Now, the only people that still care about hearing that shit are milquetoast Democrats, not young people coming out in droves, which they...
No, hardline liberals.
You know, which they you really need them to do, but they haven't done. But they've come out a little. Like, you haven't done enough. You're not exciting anyone to come out.
I met with a McAuliffe canvasser yesterday in a restaurant, and she said, I literally am going door to door and having to clasp my hands and beg some of these younger African-American voters to please go out and vote, and explaining to them what is at stake here, Steph. Anecdotally, I met with a McAuliffe canvasser yesterday in a restaurant, and she said, I literally am going door to door and having to clasp my hands and beg some of these younger African-American voters to please go out and vote.
Yeah. How about that? Please vote for us. What are you going to do? Well, not much, but vote for us. We're not Trump.
I see a lot of learning going on, and that greatly concerns me.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of learning loss over the past year and a half. We all saw with the kids at home and a lot of these options that you can get through the class with just a pass or a fail, and some of the measures that have sort of watered down the standards in not just in Virginia, many places. But Mara and Brooke, thank you very much.
Can I say one thing though about? I don't think people necessarily truly understand what critical race theory is. Younger children are not being taught critical race theory. They can't understand critical race theory. They're being taught history. So when somebody here in Loudoun County, I understand, was upset that his second grade child was taught that Christopher Columbus killed many indigenous people, that's part of history. That is what Christopher Columbus did.
Oh.
So I have a hard time.
Nice.
I think kids have to learn history, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yes,
so they
I don't think
become
anybody's
critical
against that. I think we have
thinkers.
to do a fact check on the Christopher Columbus story as well. But
Fox News is going to have to fact check that one. Yeah, we fact check it. We couldn't find anything. And we're not saying it doesn't exist. We couldn't find it. So anyways, next point.
Critical race theory, I think, sometimes is a little bit of a misnomer, because what's happening is that there's a sort of a reformed thinking and approach.
Well, there it is. The entire grift laid out in like less than 10 seconds. Yeah, a misnomer. Let's call it that. More of, it's just what we now call an umbrella term for all the things we don't like and the things we're going to lie that your kids are being taught. That's basically it.
Approach to history that teaches that the country was founded in racism. You can say critical race theory is like a legal theory that is found more in colleges.
You can say that because it's true, because that's what it is.
So maybe giving it that label has thrown some people off, but it doesn't mean that there's not things being taught that are teaching kids that they're sort of inherently, victims or oppressors.
I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that, because I have different thoughts and feelings on that.
Okay, I gotta leave it there. Thank you so much, though. And this,
I'm not gonna harp on agreeing to disagree because you're on Vox. You're being very polite, but awesome answers. Good to see. I like when people shake things up on the live television, and then the people at Fox are like, well, I'm not sure what we have to say. House Republicans celebrate GOP win in the governor race. No to leftist indoctrination. No to critical race theory, and no to identity politics. What did I tell all of you? This is what's happening. The Republicans are very good at this.
If you were...
Oh, God! No! Republicans! Stop! Oh, God! Skip! How is this legal?
Agenda. Unfortunately, what we've seen is the answer is no. This morning, they are doubling down. What did we learn from last night? We learned that parents should be empowered to make decisions about their children's education, not the federal government. We learned that Americans want more jobs, not more government welfare and reckless spending creating inflation. Americans want to fund their police departments, not defund them. Americans want freedom, not far-left socialism. This is the message that united Americans across the country, from New Jersey to New York to Virginia to Texas. It united Americans behind Republicans last night, and it is exactly what House Republicans have been saying for months. Republicans are the party of parents, of education, of small businesses, of freedom, and of family.
And you know the wild thing? You don't even need Fox News to push this narrative. Fucking Jake Tapper, CNN, MSNBC, they're pushing the same thing. They're being like, well, this is an unusual night tonight. It's quite strange what happened. Do you think that this is, I mean, I'm just asking questions here, of course, but is this a rebuke? Was this whole thing a rebuke of perhaps Joe Biden's hard turn to the left? Because he has come out as being what he says, quote, I am the next Stalin, and I am the birth child of Marx and Engels. He has said this again, just asking questions, but perhaps this is what's happening. We're seeing that that Americans are rejecting his ideology.
Democrats are the party of big government socialism, creating crisis after crisis. Even after their losses, Nancy Pelosi doubled down on her agenda yet again this morning, and that is exactly why she is a lame duck Speaker of the House. Republicans have a better optimistic vision for our nation, and we will continue to talk about the issues that matter to the American people. We're going to hear from a number of my colleagues today with special guests from the Virginia delegation, but first I want to hand it over to my colleague, Virginia Fox, who is the ranking member of the Committee on Education and Workforce. Virginia.
Thank you, Representative Stefanik. Last night's victory in Virginia proves that the voices of parents matter. It proves that parents will not and cannot be silenced. Education is at the forefront of voters' minds because it matters.
Because they made it. They made it. And boy, are they successful at weaponizing this kind of stuff. And by the way, lefties, progressives, the messaging has been really on point for certain politicians. Think of Bernie Sanders. I know right now everyone hates Bernie Sanders, okay? Apparently he's a deeply entrenched corporate Democrat. We all hate Bernie Sanders. The memes are amazing, fine. Bernie Sanders, the reason Bernie Sanders' runs were so successful, and the reason that he tapped into something that was kind of unprecedented in U.S. politics, how an independent rose to become an actual contender for the president of the United States, was because his messaging was consistent and it was true. The idea then that, hey, by the way, we deserve a lot of things that other countries are doing, countries that are less well off than us. We are the richest nation in the world, and yet we pay more for Medicaid than any other country, but we get worse results. You pay more for drugs if you go to other countries. The 1%, their wealth and the vast accumulation of their wealth is increasing all the time. It's funneling money to the richest Americans while the poorest Americans are getting fucked over. That kind of stuff, that resonates. It doesn't matter what your politics are. You even have some conservatives and some libertarians who, when they were interviewed, and they're going like, who do you love, who do you hate? Oh, I hate Hillary Clinton. I hate Joe Biden. I hate Cory Booker. I hate them all. And it's like, well, is there anyone? I don't mind Bernie Sanders. I don't mind the kind of things he says. I mean, he's a socialist, and I hate commies, so fuck that. But at the end of the day, some of the things he says kind of make sense. I guess he wants to legalize weed, so that's kind of cool. But those kind of things, they're popular amongst all Americans for a reason. So rather than give in to this culture war bullshit that the Republicans are now doing very successfully, which is just a whole bunch of idpol, which is lying about what you're being taught in schools, CRT and all that kind of stuff, why not go with the policies that Americans overwhelmingly want, that'll actually have a material change to their lives?
It matters what our kids learn in school. It matters what books are in our school libraries. It matters what kids believe about their country. Most importantly, it matters what our kids believe they are capable of achieving. The left has tried to take education out of the hands of parents, local government, and the states for too long. This is our answer to the left's attempt to nationalize education. No. No to leftist indoctrination.
To nationalize
no
education.
To critical race
I feel like you don't know half the words you're saying. What are you talking about? Are you talking about public schools?
theory, and no to identity politics. Republicans believe that.
And it's a really good sleight of hand, fugazi, if you will, to tell people no to identity politics, and now to get you all extremely angry about identity politics because you don't want CRTs taught in schools. Do you want your kids to come home and ask you why they're racist? You don't want that, do you?
That believe in policies that unite us, not divide us. We know that education is at its best when run locally and when parents have choice. That is what we are fighting for. No child should be denied the opportunity to fulfill his or her potential. It's past time to support student-focused education. Virginia's election proved that school districts no longer have to kowtow to teachers' unions. The days of caving to powerful union bosses is over. The parents have awakened and are ready and willing to fight for their kids.
Here's some other news that's kind of shocking, because you know how right now the biggest thing that the Democrats are actually working on is the January 6th insurrection, just talking about it consistently, making sure everyone knows about it. At least 6 Republicans who attended the January 6th rally, which turned into the insurrection, were elected into office on Tuesday. And now it's 8. 8. Charles Osberger has won a seat on the town council of Mansfield-Con. An official at the town clerk's office has confirmed to Huffington Post. Osberger didn't have to campaign too hard. There were only 8 candidates for the 9-seat council.
It's a great day for the future of education in our country. And now I yield to Rob Whitman, who will speak on behalf of the Virginia delegation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Virginia. What a great day today from the outcome of the races in Virginia yesterday. I want to point to my colleagues, Representative Morgan Griffith, Representative Bob Good, Representative Ben Klein, all part of an exciting evening yesterday. Very historic. Yesterday sent a message, not just across the Commonwealth of Virginia, but across the nation, that it's parents that matter, that it's parents that should be in charge of their children's destiny in school systems. That it's about small businesses and empowering them to make sure that they continue to build this economic engine that we know right now has been stifled. We know, too, that yesterday was about empowering communities to work with police departments to make sure they have the resources necessary to make our communities safer. Yesterday was historic, too. We have the first black female elected to statewide office in our new Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears. We have the first Latino elected to statewide elected office in our new Attorney General, Jason Villarez. And we have a new majority in the Virginia House of Delegates. A new day that speaks volumes about empowering people, not government, about putting things back into our local communities where they need to be, where they should be, not in the hands of Washington, not in the hands of Richmond. This really is, I think, a watershed moment that folks across the nation can look to and say, let's take our Commonwealth back here in Virginia, but other states will stay the same. Let's take our nation back.
Okay, now, this whole story isn't all doom and gloom, because I have been talking a lot about progressive politicians or progressive policies at the same time, and those progressive policies being weaponized by the Republicans, obviously, and lied about, saying that they want to enact socialism or communism in the United States. Well, at the same time, progressive politicians on the smaller local levels did not have a terrible night. The Metro DSA has come out with this, saying that apparently of their candidates running yesterday, 69% of them won in a whole bunch of different things. Mariam Khan to the Board of Education, Abdul Osmanu to the Hamden Legislative Council, Justin Farmer to the Legislative Council, Richie Floyd to the Petersburg City Council, William Burnley Jr., Somerville City Council, Charlotte Kelly, Somerville City Council. My point in this saying is that this is something that I've been talking about for a very long time. And basically the gist of this is that you should be running, if you have the ability to do so and you're interested in politics, in smaller elections, local elections, get on boards, become part of school trustees, city councils, even if you can, try running for mayor, things like that. And if you are able to win in smaller elections, ultimately it will be a very good thing for pushing for leftist policies in the United States. So in terms of the DSA's candidates, they actually did have a very good night. To answer your question, do socialists have a chance of winning in local races? Here's the results. These are 69% of the candidates for the DSA from yesterday won. No one's talking about that. Like, in all the doom and gloom because this big corporate Democrat lost to a big corporate Republican and all in the middle of everything, no one has talked about the fact that the DSA came out and they were tweeting yesterday, and I didn't see any lefty retweeting them or talking about this, that, hey, by the way, we won 69% of our candidates who ran in smaller and local elections. This is really, really good news. Really fantastic news. The fact that not only are people running in these positions, but that they are winning. And they are winning because the things that they are talking about are inspiring to people. Talking about the same messaging that most of the democratic socialists in America have been trying to push upon the American people. Fighting for higher minimum wage, fighting for Medicare for all, fighting for paid sick leave, fighting for worker leave, fighting for strong unionization. These things right now, it was just Striketober last month, are incredibly, incredibly popular with the American people. People are striking en masse. So yes, they want representation of people who are like, yes, we are pro-union, we are pro-worker cooperative, we want to see you and your unions win in your fights and your struggles. Please, elect me. Surprise, surprise. It works. It works. Not saying all the time, we are not Trump, we are not Republican, we are not fascist. January 6, January 6, January 6. Do you want a repeat of that? No? Well, then keep us in power. Okay, cool. What are you going to do? January 6, January 6. Remember that. Always think of this day. A day that will live in infamy. Yeah, no, that day was horrible. It was definitely a tragic thing. I'm just asking, what are you as a politician going to do for me and my family? Because that's actually what I'm concerned about. Not Trump. We're not Trump. Don't forget about it. Here's the linky. Oh, someone already beat me to it. Here you are, here you are. I'll check out this. Check out that. What is this? Senator Ted Cruz slams John Kerry for flying to the private conference in a private jet. He gleefully points out that no Republicans on the stage has a private jet, just before being informed that has...
John Kerry has a private jet that has flown dozens of times this past year all around the country. I don't know about you, but I don't have a private jet. I don't believe any of the people on this stage have their own private jet.
Portman does. Yeah.
John Kerry has a
Oh, destroyed with facts and logic. You love to see it. You love to see it. Dems are so crippling, smooth brain, and terminally out of touch that they actually thought this was known. Endorsed by Donald Trump. See? See? Youngkin will do all the things you want. Take Democratic Party. Like, this is my olive branch, Democrats. Take it from, like, a Canadian. This doesn't win elections. Like, at this stage now, and people have, like, incredibly short-term memories. I mean, I blame social media for a large part of that. But they're not thinking about Donald Trump at the moment. They're thinking about paychecks. They're thinking about how to get through the next day. They're thinking about being $400 away from their next emergency. They're worried about whether or not they have to buy food or pay for their kids' medical bills. And they're a lot more stressed out, the Republicans anyway, about things that don't exist because they've been lied to. Because they're really good at lying to them. They're scared that their kids are being taught CRT. They're scared that their kids are being given pornography in schools. So that's going to get parents out. That's going to get parents like, holy fuck, we have to stop this. We have to stop these perverted, democratic, pedophiles from taking over everything. And they get something like this. And do you think they're going to see this? Like, this whole thing, this looks like a campaign ad for Glenn. And at the end of it, it's like, just so you know, Republican. Trump loves him. We're not Trump. Yeah. Anyways, everybody, instead of just concentrating solely on the bad news, I shared the link to the Metro DC DSA. The list of all the victors is here. It was a very, very good night for smaller local elections, local initiatives, and the candidates who were running therein. And again, they've been bragging about this, but not a lot of people are talking about it. They won 69% of their candidates. this very well could be the future of progressive politics in the United States, in infecting and corroding the Democratic Party from within. For now, I mean, eventually you gain too much power and you're going to get some kind of strange Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden beast monster fused together with the powers of Voltron to try and stop you. That is something that happens when things get a little too close to reality. But for the interim, fantastic news. Fantastic news here. What's this? We received an email from the Portman camp that wanted to stress this was a joke. Oh, okay. The Ohio senator apparently does not have a private jet. Enjoy the rest of your day. There we go. We have a follow-up. Are we just gonna watch Ted Cruz cringe all day? I mean, I'm here for it.
One anomaly was in Austin, Texas, where Prop A, which would have increased funding and staffing for police, failed by a huge margin. What happened?
You know, it was a shame what happened in Austin. It may have been that they went a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too prescriptive in expanding the police department. It's one thing to be on defense and say we shouldn't abolish the cops. That gets widespread agreement. It may be that Austin, you know, they're enough. You know, one of the popular haunts in Austin is a beach on Lake Travis that's called Hippie Hollow. It's a nude beach. And look, you know, for the folks in Austin, Texas, they decided they didn't want to significantly grow the police department. But I'll tell you, even Austin.
What an odd thing to put in there. Unprovoked. Out of nowhere. It's kind of funny how Ted Cruz does that, eh? He just kind of he'll be tweeting and checking the Twitter and then comes across perhaps a rather titillizing photo or two and is like, oh my, Ted Cruz like. And then should I hit like? Who knows?
Still sad you didn't get Richie Sumdma.
Mumdma. I was too young to even know what it was, all right? Gravitron? That's a lie. I definitely knew what it was, but yeah, I while working as an extra on a movie set, I did not have access to MDMA to give to Christina Ricci. If anyone is confused by what I'm saying out loud right now, it's I've worked in film for a large part of my life, including being an extra, and I was an extra in the movie Prozac Nation, and I had to dance with Christina Ricci, and Christina Ricci asked me if I had both a cigarette and some MDMA, of which I had neither. So, did not impress Christina Ricci. Kubi, I'm doing fine. I think this is obviously, for a large part, something that obviously I knew yesterday as soon as these results were starting to pour in. Obviously, I was just watching and listening to them while cooking dinner and walking Chico. That immediately this was going to be weaponized against progressives. That Republicans were going to come out and say this is a rebuke of all the things that Joe Biden isn't. Because, of course, Joe Biden is not, an incredibly progressive candidate. Well, at the same time, the liberal media was going to do that thing where they also say, well, perhaps this is just Americans deciding they don't want these popular policies. And then watching what happened in Tucson, where the residents of Tucson overwhelmingly, 2-1, voted in favor of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Something that Kyrsten Sinema effectively shat upon, just scattered all over that policy. I mean, that to me is such a clear-cut case, a very, very demonstrable example of the fact that these policies are popular amongst Americans. When you look at how Americans poll on so many of these issues, if you even looked at the exit polls during the Joe Biden election, when they were actually asking about a lot of these issues, I mean, they were coming across as what Americans would call goddamn communist. Because they were saying things like, do you think that capitalism is an efficient or effective economic system? And a lot of people responded with, parts of it are broken or things like that, right? Do you support Medicaid for all, or do you support some form of public health care? Overwhelmingly, yes. Do you support environmental policies that could effectively do a range of things? Like it's an overwhelming yes kind of things.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we will build a ladder to heaven to deliver you the daily news. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are your most humble of clownish jesters. To our lords, Trevor R. and Alexander Thaler, you have our undying fealty. To our knights of the round table, Nate, that one guy, Hagbird Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariana McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Ants Are Still Running the World, Coulter Smith, Tom Groh, Val 9000, Jenna Tal, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Riley and Anna, Omni, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multimondi, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojak, Saren 42, Chronic to Hemphog, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We shall meet you in the tavern, and we raise a drink, and we salute you.